All right, guys, welcome to the November Real Estate Rundown. Super excited to be connecting with you. And just as a reminder, please, if you enjoyed the content, like, share, and subscribe. And without further ado, let's dive into it. We won't do our year wrap, even though we're starting to already reflect like we talked about.
Yes.
But it's every month has been a new month in real estate. And like you and I have talked about, wanted to answer all some of the, major questions or frequent questions that people have out there. So what are you looking at right now, Renee?
So one of the questions that I'm getting, or one of the topics that I'm informing my clients about, is the Burnett versus NAR antitrust lawsuit. So it's definitely been in the news, in the media. Some people have heard about it, some people have not, and I definitely want to make sure that everybody gets the full lowdown of where everything's at. So to kind of summarize what that lawsuit was about, a group of sellers filed a class action lawsuit alleging that NAR created and implemented the anti-competitive rules. That basically means sellers are required to pay a buyer's agent a certain amount, and those sellers felt that that amount was too high. So they did reach a verdict here recently, and unfortunately, at this time, NAR has lost the lawsuit. It was a $1.8 billion lawsuit. B versus M. That's a big difference. So it's been really interesting. At this time, nothing's changing. I honestly think we're years away from this being resolved. We do know that NAR is going to appeal the lawsuit, and so I think we have a lot of interesting times to come.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I've been seeing a lot of different content and things that come out of it, and it's from my standpoint, I'm not a realtor, but I work with realtors a lot closer, more frequently than a lot of people, and it's very interesting in that. And I think first and foremost is we don't know. Right. Mm-hmm. Bottom line, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. So there's a lot of talking heads on all sides of this. You and I were talking that it's super interesting that there, of all the jurors, there was not a single homeowner.
Correct.
So, and then even then, what's interesting is if you survey, and not to tangent too much on this, but if you survey. I'd say a lot of people don't know, the majority of people don't know what a realtor really does. They're like, right. Oh, they open the door. Right. And so it's hard when someone, and likewise in like lending, I just don't think a lot of people, they get the house and the keys mm-hmm. and they get a monthly statement, mm-hmm. right? And they don't really know what all goes into it. Not that we're trying to overinflate or over justify, commissions in the industry. But I think one other thing that's really interesting is a little bit of the hypocrisy. Just from my standpoint of interest, is the attorneys involved. I believe it's about, and guys, we're not experts on this at all. So, just talking from what we've seen and what we know, but I believe it's somewhere like a 33% cut,
right? That
the attorneys get out of this, and like that's not, and the attorney industry and their cut and all of that, and so it's just like, come on, we have service industries that work. Sometimes on a commission basis mm-hmm. Versus an hourly basis, and it's we could be into a whole other conversation of did a willing, able bodied person sign that contract or decide to negotiate it,
right?
So I don't know. Those are some of my thoughts on it.
I think the good thing is it's a topic of conversation, and no one's afraid to talk about commission. There's a reason why we ask for it. There's a reason why we have it in our contract, and it's because we work really, really hard for it. And we don't get paid unless a home is sold or bought. So all that time that you think that we're just hanging around, just opening doors, our feet are on the ground. We are researching. We are pulling the data. We are making sure that you are prepared to either buy or sell a home with the most accurate information possible. That's why we ask for our commission. It's not overinflated. It's solely our jobs at this point.
And you say we, but I feel like it's important to be careful there too.
Right.
Little stat here, right? And I was watching this show that, we were talking about some headlines here, just like overblow it, right? As far as like the real estate industry's in their tailspin and like it's changed forever. And it's a very, obviously clickbait, right? Very disingenuous. But what was interesting is, with this show that I was listening to, like, everyone knows that guy out of high school that's now making like tons of money. Right. He does nothing and he just posts about his vacations all day long. He's a realtor. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, so and we've talked about this, is in a NAR's National Association of Realtors study itself says that the biggest threat to the profession is bad realtors. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, the majority of real estate agents are not full-time.
Right.
And are not closing what I would consider a regular amount of transactions. So this is majority. Like we're talking over 60, 75%.
Yeah.
Even locally. Right. Are not, I don't want to offend anyone, but are not closing a regular amount of transactions, to be knowing, especially in a market like this that's shifting so much.
Yeah.
Like, just because you sold grandma's house last year, you're going to help your uncle buy a house in Flagstaff this year. Like, that's where not everyone is worth that commission. And so I think that there's hopefully some good that comes out of a conversation to say, hey, use the experts.
Right.
And real quick to double down on that, though, even in my industry, where, you didn't have to be super, super savvy on, pre-qualification options and digging into programs and understanding financial benefit and cost analysis and all these different things when you were selling 2% interest rates to people who had 6%.
Right.
And so we had this massive influx in both our industries of a lot of people coming in. Mm-hmm. Some estimates, and they're off the cuff right now, but estimate, there's 192,000. Did we talk about this? 192,000 licensed mortgage loan originators nationally. And there's expectations that maybe only 80 to 90,000 are going to renew their license.
Right.
Coming up in the next 6 days.
That's crazy.
So attrition can be a good thing.
Yeah.
A good thing for industry.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. If anything, it causes that, right? If people are not worth their weight, they'll get out.
I do agree with that. I think it just kind of sums it up, though. It's do better. Have the conversations. Do better. Make sure your clients are informed. Kind of to quickly go back to something that you pointed out. Work with the agents that are doing this full time. I know it's really easy to say, hey, so-and-so that I know has their license. Find out how much they do. Find out how much productivity they have each year. And honestly, it's changing weekly. I went on vacation for 1 week and came back and felt like I was in a completely different market. And so you have to catch up and you have to have your finger on every sense of the pulse in this market. Because it really does matter for your clients. Yeah. So
change is real. Well, and do you mind if I dive in on mine?
Go for it.
So I'm kind of excited about this one. And from a couple standpoints, I tell clients all the time, I love helping first time home buyers, right? And I truly do, as it's just fun to help someone go from zero to like home ownership, but it's a lot to understand. Mm-hmm. So there is some give and take here when I dive into this next topic. Is because this is where things get strategic. And so I do like to tell people, like when I'm sitting, they bought the home, they're thinking like turning into a rental, moving up, or do we buy an investment, or, starting to utilize real estate is where they choose to hold their wealth. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's certain influencers. I mean, I will go on so far as to say that I am heavily invested in real estate, mm-hmm. right? And there's certain influencers out there that would be like, cash out the 401k, like, dude, all real estate. And it's like, sometimes the numbers are pretty tempting when you look at what real estate can do for you. But this, now that I've had plenty of disclaimer in on it, multifamily and multi-generational housing and the benefit of that. And so it's really, really interesting, right, is, the city of Flagstaff, first and foremost, right? Our own little city is trying to create over, I think it's like 7,900 units since last year mm-hmm. through 2031. Mm-hmm. And we know we're landlocked.
Right.
We know, and we know the cost of Flagstaff and how like the available land, and so it's a tall order. And what I think though that we've seen a lot of policy changes that I wanted to talk about because this is impactful here, right? To where things like accessory dwelling unit, things like 2, 3, 4 unit properties, there used to be a little bit higher barrier of entry. The industry does everything. Mortgage industry does everything off of risk, and basically kind of had some higher risk associated with those things. But seeing the need for to be more open on these things, what's really, really interesting is, so let's talk about the policy changes, and then we can talk about some of the stats here, which I think are kind of interesting. So specifically, 2 policy changes are super, super key here. It used to be that accessory dwelling units existed and that's great for you kind of thing. Like, you're going to see a higher price on that home because of it. And hopefully you get some more utility, and you could calculate and think, okay, if, either the in-laws are staying, mom's moving in, or we can get some little passive income, check your county and city guides and everything, right? But we can get some passive income from this, whether it is a long-term, short-term, whatever. But you couldn't count any of that income to qualify for that home. So even though it factored into the mental budget, it wasn't actually helpful on the home front. Now, and actually as of last year, so this isn't been widely publicized here, is Freddie Mac will offer on a conventional loan that you can count accessory dwelling unit income. But historically, you couldn't use it, or it had to be like a long-term living care situation. Like you could document that your elderly parents or something like. But now it's just, there are guidelines to it, but you can count that. So that's one's really, really cool. And the second one that actually just changed, and actually it's not even by, this is going to be posting, and it's just in a couple of days from now that this changed. So we're hot on the press on this one, where it used to be that if you, as a primary purchase, so you're going to occupy the home, you could buy a 2, 3, or 4 unit for residential real estate, but there was a higher down payment requirement. So, if you're a first-time home buyer, you can do as low as 3% on a single-unit property. Subsequent buys are 5% on conventional guides. And they made it to where at 2 units, it was 15% down. 3 to 4 units was 25% down. So there's just this bigger barrier to entry. Now, as of November 18th, it is 5% across the board on 2 to 4 units. So it's huge.
That's huge.
So, just a little bit deeper calculation into it is that if you have someone looking at, let's just make it simple, like a duplex. This would be kind of similar for that ADU situation too. So you have a secondary unit, and you can count, we'd order an appraisal, have the appraiser say what the market rents are going to be. That's really important, that they'll need to find either, if it's a true second unit or an ADU comp to comp the rents. And then we can use 75% of that to help a client qualify.
Yeah.
Super, super huge.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And so, and then you take a 3 or a 4 unit, right? You have to pencil it out. There are, as of the time of speaking, like 7 multi-unit properties in Northern Arizona, which is, I would say, is that more than we've seen?
It's more than I would have expected when you pulled the numbers, because we just haven't seen that many available. Yeah. And so, and that doesn't include anything with an ADU.
Correct.
That's just multi-family.
That's just multi-unit.
Yeah.
Because in the MLS, or at least as that feed comes over, if you're looking at MLS, there's not a little tick button to say properties with ADUs. We take that back to your association. Solve that.
Sure, not a problem.
That would be pretty cool to say, hey, it has an ADU and what the true definition of that. But so, and I know it goes hand in hand. And my just quick off the cuff philosophy is a lot of those folks that do have multi units. They've at least a lot that I've seen. So very anecdotally, that owners had them for a long time. Mm-hmm. And so now it's kind of like, hey, the equity's grown up a lot. Like now it maybe makes sense for us to cash out versus keep managing this thing. But, so there's opportunity there of saying, okay, I could qualify for X amount for a single unit home. Mm-hmm. Or if I do find something that's 2, 3, 4 unit, to be able to get into that. And then from a stamp, with some, we can use it'd be 2 to 3 different units, because if you're occupying one, up to 3 units then of additional rental income.
Right.
Could be pretty interesting to see then from that economic standpoint, just opening up the doors on what you can qualify for and what that economic outlook is on that home purchase, right? Mm-hmm. If you're then getting to market rents, where refinancing down the road, your cost is coming down, like is your cost of living actually considerably less because you're being a little entrepreneurial with this?
Right. And I would expect that it would be, honestly. I think it is tough because they're few and far between. They're hard to get right now. But it kind of goes back to, I know we've talked about this in the past, is that home purchase or that first home purchase doesn't have to be your forever home. So if you think to yourself, okay, let's make this an investment. Let's think about the future. We may not be perfectly comfortable with what we are getting right now in space or whatever it is. But years down the line, you are going to be in a significantly better situation because you're able to do that.
Yeah. And I'll put up the charts here. So a couple just fun things is we can see, especially 2020, and then currently we are seeing an uptick in it. And I'd probably go so far as to say likely 2020 is what we saw a lot with, pandemic changes to lifestyles and things. But especially right now, if you look at the last decade of data that we're showing here on the screen here, you can see that this uptick now, and I'm sure it's just the cost of housing, in which actually, and this is I thought this was kind of funny. We have to have a laugh here somewhere, is when surveyed, and so this is like a closing survey that National Association of Realtors did with a sample of folks in the multi-generational housing, and what was kind of funny, I thought, was that 28%, so the largest reason for people doing, or most surveyed reason for people to do multi-generational was not to take care of
or
mom
spend
or
more
dad,
time,
or spend more time, or what they have it is wanted a larger home and multiple incomes could afford it together. And the lifestyle, we talk about
it's
lifestyle,
true.
right? We'll talk about that maybe more in a minute here. And then cost savings was a secondary, and then the third was taking care of an aging parent or relative. So very, very interesting that there's still a lot of people that like the multi-generational, or surveyed people that wanted to take care of. Now, it's both sides of things, right? It's either taking care of an aging parent, or also one of the survey groups is children, relatives over 18 never left home. But you laugh a little bit, and there's I remember that Failure to Launch movie.
Yeah.
But it is tough out there. And we know the median home buyer age is 33 years old. And actually did we talk about this? That the people are going to have to think smarter on things, and the cost of housing, it's just not as easy to get into right when you turn 21 or get that degree, and they're in your mid 20s. And so if you stayed at your parents' home, so even though we kind of laughed at that, I'm going to make a point for it. If you stayed in your parents' residence, the 4 years of college, or even 2 of those years, the amount of money that you could be bankrolling versus paying out to high rent, a lot of things to think about. So we don't fault that.
No,
in multi-generational,
not at all.
Strategic.
And so we talked a little bit about lifestyle.
Yes.
And you made the point that most moves at this point, basically it boils down to lifestyle change, whether that be moving up or family growing or anything along those lines. So it seems that's pretty accurate, right?
Yeah, especially the move up. If they're already in ownership, I'd say they would have a percentage of that first-time home buyer that is really just wanting to get out of rent and financially put something towards something. Right. But for especially that move up is 99% lifestyle.
So we went into a little bit of a debate earlier. We were talking about the lock-in effect. And so basically the lock-in effect is right now over 70% of homeowners have a 4% or less interest rate. So it's not driving people to put their homes on the market as it has in the past when they have higher interest rates. And I kind of, we feel a little bit stuck with that. Like, oh gosh, where is the inventory going to come from? If people are really this comfortable with their interest rates, we're not going to see that inventory hit like we need it to hit. But Chris made the good point that, when people are moving or buying or selling or whatever it is, it's typically about a lifestyle change. So everybody has a number. Everybody has a number to be able to sell and make it work. And yes, their interest rate might be higher, but because home pricing is not going down at this point in time, and it actually is going up, there will be a number where people will let go of those rates. Yeah,
and I think as we're looking at to where it breaks this out, we'll put this chart on the board. It's super, super cool to see this. As far as nationally, based on interest rates nationally that folks are in right now, gives you that perspective of again, everyone's number, right? So showing that sub 3 person, not gonna move. It just is no, we will live in this studio apartment until we die, even though we keep having children. It's just we can't double our payment, right? And so that's where. But as that interest rate ticks up, that opportunity then opens itself up as well. And what I think it's interesting, and this is a good point for people to consider when we start, and we're not going to go so far as to do our 2024 predictions. Right. Next month's going to be our what's behind us, and then January we'll try and figure out what's happening then, because things are changing so much. But it's a matter of the thaw is going to happen on both ends. Yeah. Right? For people to understand that buyers are going to get more comfortable as those rates and payments come down, as well as sellers getting more comfortable to say, yeah, financially, it makes sense to pay off that 30-year loan at your 4%, and not get into a, definitely, they're definitely not wanting to get into a 7, but hey, once that comes to 5.5 or 5, and they're looking at the cost and saying, well, I get the neighborhood I want. I get the extra square footage I'm looking for. I get a home that I don't have to update because we priced it out and it's just going to be way too crazy on this current property. So lifestyle. Yeah. It is, I think we can trust in that confidence, for better or for worse, that sellers will start to move because they're buyers as well.
Yeah. And I think we just have to be patient with everything. Again, things are changing quickly, but we just have to be patient with pretty much the next 12 to 18 months. Things are going to thaw, was a good word, and that doesn't happen overnight.
No. So we'll keep you closely posted. If you have any questions or comments, put them below, and we'll look forward to connecting next month on the Real Estate Rundown.